Right, so my recent purchases, a lot of you will realise we're in the Commodore 64, and what I've done is bought a brand new C64 Mini and a game to go with it. Now of course the C64 Mini has, obviously as it says, 64 games built in, and if we just take a look around the back of this box before I unopen it, you just see some games which are installed, and it even includes BASIC, which is the operating system where you can program things, that type of thing. And in addition to the C64 Mini, I bought from Cytronic.net a brand new game, and this game is a cassette, and on the end of the cassette is a USB. All you do, I presume, is plug in the USB into the C64 Mini's USB port, and I'm presuming it loads up. I've not used one of these, so there you go. So what I'm going to do today is just open it up and just show what's inside and how to use it. I'm sure at this point a lot of you watching this would have bought a C64 Mini if you're into Commodore 64 at some point. You know, these are about 3, maybe 4 years old, at which point the makers of this system have gone on to produce and sell the Maxi version, which is obviously the full-size keyboard with a working keyboard. This version, the original version, which came out a few years back, it's got a fake keyboard, so the keyboard won't work. So I'm going to just turn around the camera. We're going to open it. So I put you there, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to carefully, very carefully, open this pack. So let's just tear in here. And yeah, the purpose of this today is just to show you set up and loaded, and also update the firmware on it, which is possible to get this new cassette USB game working. So for that reason, these firmware on these systems need to be updated. Obviously it adds new features in, clears bugs, fixes, that type of thing. And apparently the latest update is including some brand new Commodore 64 games, one called Space Lords, I think. So let's have another look at this. So we open up the package, and it says in here we have the C64 Mini itself, a HDMI cable is included, 64 pre-installed games, which I presume is more than that with updates to it. There's a joystick in there, and there's a power supply, USB based power supply, and the instruction manual. So this one is actually for someone else, and I'm literally just doing an update on it, just to test everything works, that type of thing. So these are sealed very tightly, so I'm going to just get a knife and open it up as carefully as possible. And just like any other collector, never damage the boxes or things like this. Right, so it's careful as possible. This don't look very safe, but I'm sure I'm safe doing this. So just carefully cut into it like that, and I'm going to just use a knife to pop out there. So open up the box, and I'm going to just pull this out, and there we go. So nice presentation to the box when you open it, C64 Mini. And I'm going to open this up, and here we go. This is what you see when you open up. Very nice presentation, and like I said, it's a false keyboard, but it looks the part. It looks like the first Commodore 64 model, which is based on is the Mark I 1982 version. So obviously if you watch my other Commodore videos, you'll realise at this point now I actually had a 1987 Mark II model Commodore 64. Now if there was two variants of this Mini, I would have obviously gone for the one I grew up with, which was a beige cream colour, and I thought it just looked nicer. But anyway, so if we open this up, let's pop open this, and here we have it. this is the C64 Mini. Now, I was just talking to you about USB ports, and as you can see, there's two USB ports here. And we're going to do the firmware update installation using one of these ports. And also we got the game, which I'll show you how to use pretty soon. So if we look around the back, you've got an HDMI and you've got your mains input. So obviously HDMI for TV and the other for your power to power on. So put this aside, and also in this box we have, as I said, it says on the box, a joystick. Now here's a joystick. Now in the old days of gaming, games were used on these, you know, just how you play games. You know, other systems like the ZX Spectrum, I think a lot of people used keyboards back then, unless you bought what's called a Kempston expansion, which allowed you to plug in a joystick with a 9-pin header. Nowadays on modern, say, mini systems, you'll get USBs. 9-pin joysticks don't really exist anymore. Anyway, so as you can see on here, we got different buttons, and I'm assuming these are for your menus or saving and loading games. Obviously your main action buttons are to control like action, fire, jump, whatever, but most Commodore games, if you press up, that makes you jump in the game. So I think, what else have we got in here? Oh yeah, and we have got our power USB cable. Now this one doesn't appear to have a plug with it, so what you need to do is, and if you bear with me, I'll go and show you what I mean. You'll need to plug the USB part into one of these adapters, and this one is some third-party Apple iPhone plug. So like I say, just plug in the USB end into the plug, and there you go, that makes it into a plug, and that's going to power the C64 Mini. And also included in the box is your HDMI cable, and this is obviously going to give you visuals, so obviously plug that into the C64 Mini, into the back of your screen, into the back of your TV. And if you watch my other videos the other day, you'll notice this is very familiar with the manual you would have bought back in the day with a real Commodore 64. And this is just setup guides, that type of thing. It's you know, pretty basic stuff. I think it's just there for novelty's sake, really, novelty and nostalgia for people. But it's pretty simple, I'd imagine. And also in the box is Retro Reborn subscriber service. So it's saying official games, Antstream.com. I think I've come across that name before. So yeah, it's just a retro streaming service, and it's nothing to do with the C64 Mini, so this is just something someone's popped in along the line. So what I'm going to do is go away, and I'm going to set up the Commodore 64 Mini, or rather the C64 Mini, and I'm going to show you in action and updating its firmware. So I just plugged up the C64 Mini. Everything's in, the HDMI cable and the USB power supply, and there's a button on the side, so I'm presuming you press this and it powers it on. No, it doesn't. So I just plugged it in and I've turned it on, and your first screen you'll see is this. So I'm going to go ahead and use a joystick, and like I mentioned, these are your action buttons, so I'm presuming you use the action buttons to select these options. And there we go. So these are your built-in games, and this is a factory, brand new factory C64 Mini from a few years ago, so obviously there's going to be updated games at this point. But if we just scroll along for now, you'll see there's several different games in here. So I'm next gonna see which firmware it's on. So if we go to system information, it will say no firmware update found. So this is where we need to go on the PC and download to USB stick a firmware update file, which will likely be a .bin file. So if we look at this, it will say build date. So at the time when this was manufactured, it was 2018, and this would have been a most recent version of the software. So I'm going to update that now. So yeah, to update the C64 Mini, just pop in a USB stick, and if you just check its format file system, so if we right click on the USB stick, if you go to properties, this one is actually a USB drive. Obviously it's a USB drive, and the file system is FAT32. Now to do these firmware updates, you need to be on FAT32. So if you're not sure how to do this, you just right click on the stick again, which is inserted, left click on format, and under file system you choose FAT32. So volume label can be, say, C64, and just leave it as quick format. Press start, that'll format it. Formats in just erases everything and takes the USB stick back to default, just empty and ready to go. So next up, you need to just type into Google, say C64 Mini firmware update. Your first result is Retro Games Ltd, who produces this system. And if you just scroll down to upgrade the C64, left click on that. And all you need to do, will give you instructions here, and it'll also give you notes of what's included in the latest firmware version. So as I was saying, it adds a new game, Space Lords, which is a multiplayer, and I'm pretty sure there's other games on there which is loaded. And also in this firmware update is it adds the ability to use a mouse for this system, which is another accessory peripheral which this company made for the C64, but a lot of C64 games you don't really need a mouse. There's only a couple of games. And it also adds support for up to 4 joysticks, and it also adds support for the gamepad, which is on the upcoming Amiga Mini, which is also going to be used on the C64 Mini. So if you just go to the download section, and it's a .bin like I said I thought it would be, left click and download that file, and download, and then it will probably ask you to save it somewhere. So in this case I'm going to save it to my USB FAT32 drive, and just save. And so that should now be in the C64 USB stick, which it is. So right click on the stick and eject it safely. If you don't eject USB sticks, they become corrupt over time. And I'm now going to switch the TV back to my HDMI 1 where the C64 is in. So I'm guessing just you put the USB stick into one of the spare ports. So I'm going to just whack it in here, make sure it's the right way round so it fits in. Right, so if we use the joystick again to go to the settings tool wrench symbol and system information, and now as you can see it says a firmware update has been found, which is the bin we just downloaded and put onto the USB stick. So do you wish to upgrade this firmware? So obviously apply it, and using the action button on the joystick, just press apply, and it will then show you that it's installing the firmware update to the C64 Mini. Now I'm guessing it will reboot itself to update itself, and when it starts again I'm guessing you'll see new games pop up. Right, so if we just check that it's updated to the recent, and yeah, you can see already that there's new options here. So you've got different models actually, including this firmware. So if you go onto computer model, you've got two selections, C64 PAL, which is the European systems, and NTSC is an American system. Yeah, so also got another option saying boot mode. Wrong button again. Yeah. So loads of different options in here to look around. But what we're looking for is the system information to see if that update is, update itself. So there you go. It's been updated from 2018 to now 2021, December the 13th. And that's that. So if we come out of here, and if you look at the bottom left of the screen, it will tell you which button to press to back out of that, which is, it's saying the far right button on here. So anyway, we've now got some new additions to the library, which is Barnsley Badger, and Barnsley Badger is a Cytronic game. Obviously Cytronic.net, they deal with brand new Commodore 64 releases. I personally owned this one a few years ago, and it's not a bad game. It's like a Spectrum type style game. And if you look at author, it will say Rottensteiner and Story, and these are kind of like the modern heroes of modern Commodore 64 games, and also say the release year 2016. And Cyberdyne Warrior, I said in my other video for my magazines, I used to play this one as a kid and I used to love it. It was on a Commodore format demo tape, and it was very cool. And you got Cybernoid 2, which a lot of people's familiar with. That's a really good game, but very hard. And Firelord, it just looks like a Spectrum port, and it was a direct Spectrum port. I used to play this as a kid too. To this day, I've no idea what to do with this game, but I used to play it nevertheless because it was fun. And this one as well, this is a 2017 game, which is called Galaxia, which is obviously a Galaxian clone for modern times. And another one I used to play as a kid, which is included, is Gribbler's Day Out, and it looked very basic and not very great, you know, even as a kid. So it's not that it's aged, it just always looked this bad. And Hesiod, I'm surprised to see that on here again. This is another Cytronic release from 2016. So you've got a mixture of classic games and whatever, and it's got Nobby the Aardvark, which is a really cool platformer, but very hard like most Commodore games. And I'm guessing this is a modern game too, yeah, Pet Snake Redux from 2020. So it's obviously based on the Nokia 3310 Snake games. So yeah, some really cool additions, and wow, it's got Solus on there as well, which is a great modern game from 2012. You got Space Lords, which I was talking about, Speedball 2, which was another popular game from back in the day. And that's it, and I believe you can actually change scan lines, that type of thing. So if you go onto that option there, it will give you different visuals, different style visuals. 4x3 means an old style cut off box type screen where the sides are blacked off, because that's how TVs used to be. And CRT is going to show you scan lines, like lines which would have been on a TV set, you know, back in the day, just to give it that nostalgia. So I'm going to just go ahead and boot up one of these games, which I'm presuming you press fire button, yeah. And we're straight in, and yeah, this is a really jolly game. And Barnsley, funny enough, it's actually a part of Yorkshire. So it's a tough game, and I like it, you know, it's like very Spectrum in style and colour, so it's got a real good cool charm to it. So what I'm going to do next is open up this Cytronic Commodore 64 cassette USB tape and see if that works. So I'm going to just carefully open this tape, because like I said, this is actually for someone else I'm doing this for. So just carefully open it, and like I say, the purpose of opening this is to make sure it's actually fully working with the C64 MINI, which Cytronic.net claims it does. It's just plug and play, but you know, for the purposes of this video, we'll see what happens. So just carefully unwrap it. And I wouldn't have thought this clam case, which is what these were known for, they're clam cases, I wouldn't have thought it's going to fit back in this wrapper, which is a shame, because it's got a very nice exclusive sticker on there. So if we open it up, there you go. So this would have been, I think it was the early 80s, clam cases like this were kind of common, rather than your traditional cassette case, which was crystal and obviously harder plastic. So if we take this out, it's really nicely printed as well, I must say. That's really good work on Cytronic's behalf. So shout out to Kenz, K-E-N-Z, who owns Cytronic, which has been going since the early 90s, and it's amazing they're still going to this day. So if you look at the bottom where the reel of the tape would have been, you have actually got a USB, which is what I said. So this, I presume, obviously plugs into the C64 MINI, so let's check that out. So with the joystick attached and the USB actually still in there, so take the USB out from the firmware update. Gonna just pop in this tape, which is a bit awkward to put in there actually, since the joystick is in there. So how do we get around this? There we go, it should fit in. That's nicely fitted. And right, so on the screen now, since I've just plugged that in, a little USB icon appears at the bottom. So click on that and you'll get file loader. So I'm guessing if you plug this into a PC, you'll have access to wallpapers and that type of thing. So that's what that seems to be about. So go back into USB, and if you look for the disc icons, and there's a cartridge icon, you would then press what I'd imagine would be the fire button. Now if you go for the cartridge option, which is obviously not the disc one, the cartridge, this should be an instant loader and it'll be quicker to load up rather than a disc. So and there we go, we're in. So this is the first Soulless game, which is already on the C64 MINI, but like I said, there's a couple of files, and one of them will say Soulless 2, so that is actually the game which is sold on the cassette USB. So, you know, it looks very pixelated, and it probably won't show on camera, but there's options to clear this pixelation. So if you press one of the buttons, and it's the right button, you can probably go on to clean up that and get a fresher look, but I'm not sure how right now. But I've done what I set out to do. I've updated the firmware and showed you the USB cassette game working, so that's how you update a C64 MINI in 2022 January. Thanks for watching. And I'm going to just add one more thing to this video. Just like most modern systems nowadays, just don't unplug it when you're finished with this. It will corrupt the software and you'll end up with a pile of plastic which don't work. So to shut these down, you need to go on the tool wrench symbol, and just safely go to shutdown device, and it will tell you to shut down there, so that's it, and it will shut down. So never just take the plug out of this thing. And there it is, turned off. Thanks for watching.